Isaiah Thompson boards his airline's flight, expecting a peaceful journey in anonymity. Yet, a dismissive flight attendant quickly shatters that peace, treating him with open disdain. Little does she know, Isaiah isn't just another passenger. He's the CEO of Elevation Air, on a mission to quietly evaluate the airline's commitment to respect and inclusion. As tensions rise, Isaiah's quiet dignity becomes a powerful catalyst, forcing the airline to confront hidden prejudices. With the end of the flight near, Isaiah's poised revelation will change more than just his own journey. It will transform an entire company's culture. Isaiah Thompson strode through Miami International Airport, blending seamlessly into the bustling crowd. Dressed simply and with quiet purpose, he held his boarding pass for Flight 472 to Salvador. Despite his stature as CEO of Elevation Air, Isaiah avoided drawing attention, choosing instead to be an observer. "Mr. Thompson, right this way," the check-in attendant said, her voice polite but reserved, unaware of his position. Isaiah offered a gentle nod, scanning his surroundings with thoughtful eyes. This journey was more than a trip. It was a window into the culture of his airline, and he intended to remain unnoticed for as long as possible. As he approached the boarding gate, he felt a mix of excitement and determination, ready to see Elevation Air from a passenger's perspective. Once on board, Isaiah found his seat in first class and began to settle in. As passengers continued to board, a tall, blonde flight attendant caught his attention. "Sir, please, take your seat," she said briskly, her eyes flicking over him before she moved on, addressing others with warmer tones. Isaiah observed her interactions with others, noting the subtleties in her demeanor. "Good evening, ma'am," she greeted another passenger with a warm smile, her voice softer, warmer. There was a visible difference in her tone, which didn't go unnoticed by Isaiah. He leaned back, sensing the first cracks in the facade of his company's values, and wondered how far they might extend. As Isaiah observed the cabin, he saw Charlotte approach a well-dressed couple, offering a polite nod and carefully setting down their drinks. A few moments later, she arrived at his seat, her expression cooler. "What can I get you to drink?" she asked, a trace of impatience in her voice. "Just water, please," Isaiah replied calmly, watching her demeanor shift as she served him with noticeably less warmth. In contrast, Daniela, a friendly Latina flight attendant, moved through the cabin with genuine kindness, treating every passenger with the same warmth. Isaiah felt a swell of pride for Daniela's behavior, but Charlotte's attitude cast a shadow, igniting a quiet frustration within him. As Charlotte returned with drinks, she reached over with a plastic cup of orange juice, but the cup tilted, spilling over Isaiah's lap. "Oh, my apologies, sir," she said with a forced smile, her voice devoid of any real remorse. Isaiah met her eyes, noting the faint smirk on her face as she handed him a napkin. "Quite all right," he replied, dabbing his clothes with as much composure as he could muster. Jaden, a young law student seated nearby, watched the incident unfold and exchanged a knowing glance with Isaiah. Isaiah felt his frustration deepen, aware of Jaden's watchful eyes and the underlying biases now laid bare. Later, as the flight settled into a comfortable hum, Jaden leaned over. "Excuse me, sir," he began, his tone respectful. "It seems you're getting the short end of the stick here." Isaiah smiled, finding a moment of solidarity. "It's something I've learned to handle over the years," he replied, his tone calm but firm. Jaden nodded, looking inspired by Isaiah's resilience. "People think change has to be loud, but sometimes it's what you don't say that speaks the loudest," Isaiah added, sharing wisdom drawn from experience. As the flight continued, Charlotte's attitude toward Isaiah only worsened. Her cool detachment became more evident, especially when she interacted warmly with other passengers. Isaiah noticed every exchange, his patience wearing thin. He heard her say to a well-dressed man across the aisle, "If there's anything you need, sir, just let me know." She turned to Isaiah with barely a glance, muttering, "Anything else?" The difference was stark. Isaiah's mind churned with questions about how many passengers had endured this kind of treatment. He began mentally documenting each interaction, understanding that his silent observation might soon need to become action. Isaiah's attention was soon drawn to Daniela, who was assisting a family in economy class. She bent down to speak gently to a little girl, soothing her as she struggled with her seatbelt. Isaiah admired Daniela's effortless warmth and professionalism, a striking contrast to Charlotte's detached approach. When Daniela returned to first class, Isaiah caught her eye and gave her a nod of appreciation. She smiled warmly, almost as if she understood his gratitude. The contrast between Daniela and Charlotte became clearer to Isaiah, solidifying his commitment to the values he wanted his company to represent. A sudden bout of turbulence caused a stir in the cabin, and Charlotte's demeanor shifted from detached to outright annoyed as she braced herself beside Isaiah's seat. "Please remain seated and calm," she said sharply, her eyes briefly meeting Isaiah's in a glare, as if holding him personally responsible for the disturbance. Isaiah raised an eyebrow, holding back his words but aware of the passengers who had noticed her attitude. Jaden, seated nearby, looked over at Isaiah and shook his head slightly. The brief moment intensified Isaiah's frustration, pushing him closer to the realization that he would need to address this situation directly. Once the turbulence passed, Daniela found a moment to speak with Isaiah as she passed through the aisle. "It must be inspiring to work for an airline that stands for something," she said softly, surprising him. "I've always been proud to work here, even when things get challenging." Isaiah looked at her thoughtfully. "Pride in one's work can make all the difference," he replied, his voice layered with meaning. Daniela nodded, glancing toward Charlotte before continuing. "I just hope we can keep growing in the right direction." Her words resonated with Isaiah, underscoring the importance of addressing the issues he'd observed firsthand. Reflecting on his exchanges with Daniela and Jaden's silent support, Isaiah felt a determination settle over him. He could no longer ignore the problem. Enough watching from the sidelines, he muttered under his breath, feeling the weight of his responsibility as CEO. He knew that this journey was more than just about observing. It was about setting an example. His mind sharpened with purpose, Isaiah resolved to confront Charlotte at the right moment, ensuring that the message he delivered would resonate beyond this flight and into the heart of Elevation Air itself. Charlotte continued her dismissive behavior, especially toward Isaiah and any other passengers she deemed unremarkable. She moved through the cabin, addressing certain travelers with a polite smile while casting indifferent glances at others. As she passed Isaiah's row again, her eyes briefly met his, and he saw a flicker of annoyance. "Is everything all right, sir?" she asked, her tone flat. Isaiah held her gaze calmly, replying, "Everything is just fine, thank you." She quickly turned away, but Isaiah's steady look had unsettled her. Nearby, Jaden raised an eyebrow at the exchange, sharing a silent understanding with Isaiah. The tension was palpable, setting the stage for what was to come. The passengers around Isaiah began exchanging subtle glances as they observed Charlotte's inconsistent behavior. Jaden, seated beside Isaiah, leaned over and whispered, "It's as if she's two different people, depending on who she's talking to." Isaiah nodded, his voice low but firm. "You're not the only one who's noticed," he replied, giving Jaden a meaningful look. Jaden hesitated, then asked, "Do you think? Will you say something?" Isaiah considered the question carefully before answering, "Yes, I think it's time. But I'll wait until the right moment." The quiet conversation ignited a spark in Isaiah, reinforcing his resolve. Jaden's words lingered with Isaiah, inspiring him to take a more active stance. A few moments later, as Charlotte walked past again, Isaiah cleared his throat. "Excuse me, Miss Dunham," he said, watching her face carefully. She paused, a look of mild irritation flashing across her expression. "Yes, sir," she replied, her tone barely polite. Isaiah let a slight smile play on his lips. "I'd like to introduce myself. Isaiah Thompson, CEO of Elevation Air." The color drained from her face, and her mouth opened slightly in shock. Nearby passengers turned to listen, their attention caught by the unfolding revelation. As Isaiah's words sank in, Charlotte struggled to regain her composure. I didn't realize," she stammered, her voice faltering. Isaiah's gaze remained steady. "Perhaps that's the problem," he replied calmly. "Judging someone based on appearances often leads to mistaken conclusions." The surrounding passengers watched with mixed expressions of surprise and approval. Jaden leaned back, crossing his arms with a satisfied smile, and Daniela, who had overheard, gave Isaiah an encouraging nod from across the aisle. Charlotte's facade had cracked, leaving her visibly shaken and unsure of how to proceed. The cabin was silent as Isaiah addressed the passengers. "Thank you all for your patience. I wanted to observe our airline service as a regular passenger today. Sadly, I've seen behaviors I cannot condone." He glanced at Charlotte, who looked down, her face flushed. Elevation Air was built on the principles of respect and equality, and it's my commitment to ensure that these values are upheld for every passenger. The cabin filled with soft applause from passengers, their expressions showing gratitude and relief. Isaiah returned to his seat, feeling empowered and ready to initiate real change as the journey continued toward its destination. The aftermath of Isaiah's revelation left the cabin in tense silence. Charlotte retreated to the crew's quarters, clearly shaken and unsure how to face the passengers. Daniela approached Isaiah quietly, offering an apology. "I'm so sorry, sir," she said sincerely. "Some of us truly believe in the values this company stands for." Isaiah smiled warmly at her. "I can see that, Daniela. It's people like you who remind me why this mission matters." She nodded, visibly relieved. Isaiah's reassurance encouraged her, solidifying her place as an ally in his push for change. After a moment to gather his thoughts, Isaiah sought out Charlotte for a private conversation. He found her by the galley, her eyes fixed on the floor. "Charlotte," he began calmly, "I think it's time we talk about what happened." She looked up, defensiveness flashing in her eyes. I didn't mean to offend anyone," she mumbled. Isaiah's gaze remained steady. "Intentions aside, respect is non-negotiable," he replied. His tone was gentle but firm, leaving her with no choice but to confront the impact of her actions. She fidgeted, nodding slowly as his words began to sink in. Isaiah returned to his seat, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. As he settled in, Daniela approached him again, her face filled with gratitude. "Thank you, sir," she said softly, "for standing up for what's right." Isaiah looked at her, pride evident in his eyes. "Elevation Air needs more people like you, Daniela. Your dedication to fairness is invaluable." She smiled, emboldened by his encouragement. His words sparked something within her, inspiring her to become an active advocate for the respectful culture he envisioned for the airline. Several passengers began sharing their own experiences of bias, sparking a quiet but powerful conversation in the cabin. Jaden spoke openly, his voice calm but passionate. "It's time we confront these issues head-on, not just brush them aside." Isaiah listened, deeply moved by their stories. He realized that this incident was a catalyst, a chance to create lasting change that would resonate beyond this flight. The passengers' candid stories fueled his resolve, broadening his vision for a systemic reform that would go beyond addressing just this single encounter. As the flight neared its destination, Isaiah felt his commitment to change solidify. He reflected on the journey and the conversations he had shared, understanding that the changes he wanted would take dedication and perseverance. "This is only the beginning," he murmured, looking out the window. With a determined smile, he began outlining the first steps he would take once back on the ground. His mind was set, ready to initiate the reforms Elevation Air needed to become a true beacon of respect and inclusivity. Isaiah returned to Elevation Air's headquarters, a new sense of purpose guiding him. He called an emergency meeting with his leadership team, his gaze firm and resolute. "We have an issue with respect and inclusivity that needs addressing." Immediately, he began. His team exchanged nervous glances, but Isaiah's calm authority stilled any objections. "From now on, we will initiate mandatory diversity and sensitivity training for all employees," he announced, his voice leaving no room for debate. His team nodded, sensing the shift Isaiah envisioned for the company's culture. With the groundwork laid, Isaiah spearheaded a policy overhaul, enacting a new anonymous feedback system for passengers and employees alike. "I want everyone to feel safe voicing their experiences," he explained to his HR director, who scribbled notes eagerly. "This isn't just about fixing one incident. It's about building a foundation of respect that reaches every corner of Elevation Air." His passion ignited a spark among his team members, who began to see Isaiah's vision clearly. The plan was ambitious, but they were committed to its success. Meanwhile, Charlotte, suspended after the incident, reluctantly attended sensitivity training. She sat in silence, listening as people shared their experiences of discrimination and prejudice. A story from a fellow trainee, a man whose son had faced unfair treatment, struck her. For the first time, Charlotte felt the weight of her actions, her usual defenses crumbling. During a break, she approached the man, her voice soft, almost hesitant. "I didn't realize the impact words can have," she admitted, her eyes downcast. He offered her a nod, and in that moment, Charlotte began to see herself from a new perspective. Isaiah's reforms extended to Daniela and Jaden as well. He reached out to Daniela, inviting her to mentor new employees on inclusivity. "Your kindness is exactly what we need to build upon," he told her, his gratitude evident. Daniela beamed, honored to take on the role. Isaiah then connected Jaden with the airline's legal team, offering him insight into corporate law and the importance of justice. Jaden's excitement was infectious, his admiration for Isaiah growing with each opportunity he was given to contribute to the mission. To cement the changes publicly, Isaiah organized a press conference, announcing Elevation Air's commitment to becoming a leader in inclusivity. Standing before cameras, he spoke with conviction. "Our values are rooted in respect and equality," he declared. "We are implementing policies that ensure every voice is heard." The press conference received widespread praise, and the airline's commitment began to restore public trust. Isaiah knew this was only the beginning, but as he looked out at the audience, he felt a sense of accomplishment, ready to lead Elevation Air into a brighter future. Elevation Air launched its new sensitivity training program, with employees from all levels attending sessions designed to foster respect and empathy. In the opening session, Isaiah addressed the participants. "Change isn't always easy, but it's essential," he said, his gaze steady and sincere. "Our goal is to make everyone who boards our flights feel valued." Some employees nodded in agreement, while others appeared skeptical. However, as Isaiah continued sharing his personal vision for inclusivity, a few hesitant faces began to soften, inspired by his commitment. After completing her training, Charlotte returned to work under probation. She was visibly nervous, approaching her duties with newfound humility. Daniela noticed the shift in her and gave her a warm nod. "Welcome back," Daniela said gently. Charlotte managed a small smile. "Thank you. I know I have a lot to prove." Daniela nodded, offering her quiet support. "We're all learning. Just keep doing your best." This small interaction marked a turning point for Charlotte, reinforcing her determination to change and make amends for her past behavior. Meanwhile, Daniela thrived in her new mentorship role, guiding new employees on inclusivity standards and helping shape Elevation Air's culture. She approached Isaiah one day, gratitude clear in her expression. "Thank you for this opportunity," she said. Isaiah smiled, his respect for her evident. "You've earned it, Daniela. Your kindness has always represented what we strive for." Empowered, Daniela embraced her role, knowing her contributions were helping to build a more inclusive airline, exactly as Isaiah had envisioned. Jaden, deeply inspired by the journey he had witnessed, decided to share his experience. He wrote an article detailing the transformation he'd observed in Elevation Air, particularly Isaiah's role in bringing about this change. "The power of one leader to reshape an entire organization is remarkable," he wrote, his words filled with admiration. The article went viral, capturing public attention and further enhancing the airline's new reputation. Jaden's reflections solidified his own commitment to justice, inspired by Isaiah's quiet but powerful example. Isaiah stood in his office, gazing out the window with a sense of satisfaction and pride. Reflecting on the journey from that flight to the company-wide changes, he felt at peace. Elevation Air was becoming the beacon of respect and inclusivity he had always dreamed of. He knew there would be challenges ahead, but with leaders like Daniela, advocates like Jaden, and a reformed Charlotte, he was confident in the path they'd forged. With a hopeful smile, Isaiah closed this chapter, envisioning a legacy that would inspire a new standard for the entire industry.